Good afternoon and welcome back to Bald Father Bets, everyone. I do not have my usual headphones on. We're just going with over-the-air sound right now, so my sound quality is always shit, but it might be even more shit today. Week 7 college football recap video. First, we'll give you a quick recap of last night. But first, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel, notifications on, and give this video some love, like, share, comment. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the overall college football landscape, as well as anything that stood out to you on week 7. So Monday Night Football last night, we were 7-3. 5 units pregame win on the Falcons, added the 2 units at halftime on Falcons +7 for second half. We got very lucky there because they got that pick at the very end there rather than Bills getting a garbage time score. That was the 7 units won, and then we were 3 units lost on the Commanders. I told you guys sometimes you can get fooled by different line movements and stuff like that, and that one happened to me for sure. So we were on the Commanders. Commanders were, I said all day that the action wasn't tracking to the correct side. The Commanders line kept growing, but it didn't make any sense because most of what we respect was on the Bears. I then tried to make too much sense of it, and I did make too much sense of it. We ended up being on the Commanders. The Bears was the correct side. It was very close, though, in terms of what the analysis showed. So my model had the game at 4.5 points for the Commanders. Some of the respected models I saw were around 5, and then respected sharp money that I trust did have some splits, but more was on the Bears, and I should have trusted mainly my model, which is my main tool. But then also a lot of the tracking that we have. But anyway, still a good day. 7-3 overall for Monday Night Football, so we're good there. With regards to the individual games, we'll talk about that in overall landscape in our NFL recap video tomorrow. But Bills, they're not a good team, and when they're injured like that, they're really not a good team. They just have Josh Allen. But if they don't do the turnover thing, where they're plus margin and turnovers in every game, it neutrals them out. The hell does that even mean? It negates a lot of their advantages very quickly. And then really they're just left with Josh Allen. But last night he had truly no supporting cast. And so, he can't, like I said, Josh Allen can't throw the ball to himself. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. But the Falcons overall are probably on par with the Bills, and they're definitely a better team when the Bills have that many injuries. We'll talk about this tomorrow, but you can still get pretty good odds on the Patriots to win the AFC East over the Bills. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Commanders and Bears, that was just a toss-up really down to the last second, which is why the correct side on that was the team plus the points. But the Commanders did take an 8-point lead late, which we thought maybe was going to eke it out for us, but they just didn't have tackling all night long. And this Bears team is really starting to shape an identity and actually be quite explosive offensively under Ben Johnson and play physical, which is something that they really didn't do a lot last year. So you can't have poor tackling when you go up against them, and the Commanders did. The Commanders couldn't tackle DeAndre Swift to save their life, so that was really the main difference in that one. All right, college football, week 7. We'll start out in the morning. Ohio State, Illinois. Ohio State should be ranked number 1 in everyone's polls. The defense is putting up some pretty historic performances. My favorite coaching job game plan of the week was by far Ohio State. The vanilla offense was perfection. They did absolutely nothing that could spark any sort of a turnover for, Illinois, like I said, forget what Ryan Day said in his press conference. He knows Illinois is a shit team, and he knows the only chance Illinois had in that game was for Ohio State to give it to them, and they completely eliminated any of that from their game plan. Good teams win, great teams cover. That's a spot where Sharps were all over Illinois, we were all over Illinois. Ohio State shouldn't cover that spread in that spot. In a big noon kickoff game on the road, Illinois all hyped up, 14, 15-point spread. They should win the game, but that's one of those ones where teams like that get tripped up and they're able to eke out a win, or somehow they get beat. And Ohio State just has none of that, man. They have none of that. That game, there was never even a question, honestly, as to what was going to happen in that game. And it was play the most boring offensive game plan you can play. People can say whatever they want to say. At the end of the day, win, cover, move on to the next one. Ohio State is ranked the number one team in the country, as they should be in anyone's poll. The concern we have for them is, in you're looking at this schedule, especially with that defense, I'm not seeing a game on the schedule where they're going to have to rely on Julian Sayin to like win them a game in the fourth quarter. And most likely that would happen at some point before the playoff is done. So if they get into the playoffs and they go up against a team that's a bit more battle tested, and you get into a fourth quarter situation, 3 minutes left, down by 4, or you get into a third quarter situation, 10-point deficit, etc. And for the first time all season, in a winner go home playoff game against a team of equal or similar talent level, if it's the first time Sayin's had to do it, could you get a mistake there? So you almost, as an Ohio State fan, you almost want them to get tested at some point throughout the regular season so that he gets a little bit of that experience. Because him and Hartline haven't been through that together. So it's almost like how good they are right now could almost end up being their worst enemy. Because, Ohio State's schedule, they play a Big Ten schedule, so they don't have anyone on it this year. Especially they missed Oregon this year. Penn State's going through what Penn State's going through. So really the only game they played so far was against Texas, and Texas was having some pretty strong offensive woes during that. In a game that, by the box score, from a team stats standpoint, Ohio State underperformed to Texas. So you're a little bit concerned with the unknowns there, but we're talking first world problems here. We're talking number one team in the country just trying to find something that they should be concerned about. Phenomenal. Alabama, Missouri. So that is one of the best wins. I keep saying this week after week, right? We said about Alabama last week and the win against Vanderbilt. They went out to the deep water. That game went exactly as Vanderbilt wanted it to go, and Alabama still won. Win against Missouri, extremely impressive, extremely adverse overcoming the way that game started out, taking away Missouri's best weapons. It was just vintage Alabama. Alabama doesn't have a 2015 Alabama defense by any means. They have a top Alabama tier secondary. That is the best secondary in the country. They are almost perfect, honestly. And really the only way you're going to get Bama is you got to run on them, and then you got to force them to bring people down in the box, because you got to get them out of what they're trying to play on the secondary level, because you're not beating them throwing. I thought Missouri played pretty well. Prabula could have played better. they could have been a little bit. I thought they panicked a little bit too quickly and got away from the run game. But I mean, they got down. So, it's easy for me to say that now, but I mean, they were down. They were down by multiple scores. So I really can't blame them all that much. I would have liked to seen a little bit more balance in. But the other thing I don't know is how many of those calls were option calls and Prabula tucked it through. You don't know that as a fan watching. So, really the main thing about that is, so I said preseason, and I've stayed on it all season. I haven't come off. I said preseason, there were two teams that I thought could win the national title. They were Ohio State and Texas. I hadn't changed my mind on that. Even up until last week, I said they're Ohio State and Texas. I'm adding a team to it. So I still think Ohio State and Texas are in the mix, and I'm adding Alabama to that mix. I may add more as the season goes on. The next one who's on the cusp is Miami, but I'm still not 100% convinced. I'm pretty convinced. I'm more convinced that Miami will make the playoff than I am, say, Texas, right? Because I don't think with that schedule Texas gets in at a 9-3. I think they have to win out and go 10-2, unless some crazy shit happened. If they get to the playoff, I'm much more confident that Texas will perform well versus Miami. So I'm pretty confident Miami's gonna get there. I'm just not sold yet on them actually being able to win 3 or 4 games in a row against that competition and getting it done. So, yeah. But they're the next one that's on that tier list. But I'm officially adding Alabama to it. I think they have everything that they will need in this season, given the landscape of college football this year, to win a national championship if they are in the right position. I also think that they are one of the teams who has an opportunity to make it at 9-3, but we'll see. Moving on to the afternoon, I take very little away from the Texas-Oklahoma game. There's a reason we were 15 units on Texas. That was always going to happen in that game. Texas is a better team than Oklahoma. I am a little bit surprised that OU played Mateer. It may cost them because it does seem like he got a little bit re-injured in the hand. So, yeah. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time on that one because it doesn't really matter. Texas should be more worried about one of their next 2 games getting them in at Kentucky or at Mississippi State than the OU game. They match up really, really well against OU. On the road at Kentucky or on the road at Mississippi State could be and either of those two could be a trap game. For OU's sake, I think there's a chance they're going to have a really difficult end of the season. You look at their 2 quality wins, which is Michigan and Auburn, and then you're kind of like, what do we think Auburn is? 6-6, 7-5 SEC team maybe. What do we think Michigan is? An 8-4, 9-3 team maybe. So those are about equal then. So then what is Oklahoma? A 7-5, 8-4 SEC team. So maybe just a little bit better than either of those. I think things could get pretty difficult for Oklahoma to finish out the year. Indiana, Oregon. I'm hearing the notion a lot of this game showed us more about how good Indiana is than exposed something from Oregon. I agree to an extent, but then I disagree. So we told you guys that we thought while it cost them the games last year, Indiana refusing to do anything gimmicky against Ohio State or Notre Dame to like try and get that win, that they wanted to just play them straight up and come out with a win. We told you that that would serve well for them this year in this game against Oregon. We were on Oregon. We even told you, we don't bet money lines, but we told you to take the money line. Indiana didn't really surprise me with what they did at all. Some of the concerns we had regarding Oregon came true. When you take away DeCorian Moore, there's concerns, especially with the loss of Evan Stewart. When you put a lot, when you put a lot of pressure on the QB position anywhere, it can be a problem. I wanted to see Dante Moore have a lot of pressure on him, and I wasn't necessarily all that impressed. They had come into that game going up against teams that couldn't sack them. Everyone said, well, they've only given up 1 sack, and I responded to that with, well, how are they going up against high-pressure 8 teams? And they weren't. They went up against a high-pressure 8 team, and they got beat pretty bad when it came to keeping him upright and keeping him on his spot. So Oregon to miss the playoffs, you can get it like plus 200, plus 210. I love that right now. That's one of my favorite plays for a futures moving forward. I'm not really all that sold on Oregon. So we'll monitor. We'll see. We're not gonna have a play on it, but interested in the Oregon-Rutgers game this upcoming week. It's a difficult travel spot for them. Yeah, interested in that one. Texas A&M was as impressive as Indiana, in my opinion, this week. If you're going to say Indiana was the most impressive team, then I think A&M was the second most. They are answering essentially every question mark to them. The ability for them to get to play any sort of style of game. Marcel Reed's they can out-physical almost anyone. Florida's one of the most physical teams in the country. A&M beat them up pretty good. Didn't let Ball get going in the run game. And then Reed's accurate, man. Like, that question with Reed, the athleticism was always there. The question was, on a consistent basis, could he be 65% plus accuracy? And he's answered those questions all year so far. A&M is a true contender. A&M is a true... the other teams I put in that tier 2 of contenders, but I just have Miami right at the top of it, is A&M and UGA. And I have A&M above Georgia right now in that tier of 2. I like, if they can show maybe one more confidence point, they're added into the national title contention too. I'm still not... I'm 90% there on Marcel Reed. I'm not 100%. And that's really the only thing that holds me back with them. Like, whereas with Carson Beck, I don't really have any questions. It's more about Miami's defense, not defensive line, but still the secondary, where I have some questions. USC, Michigan, we're not surprised. We told you if I wasn't slightly worried about USC's run game entering that, just after kind of the Illinois, some of the things especially where they got away from it, that was a 20-unit game, but because of that, we dropped that down to 10 units. I'm not really surprised by that at all. That was a terrible travel spot for Michigan. That was a terrible time set up in terms of where it came in the schedules for Michigan. That was really hard. I thought Underwood played fine. He's a true freshman, guys. Like, the only true freshman to come in and essentially like be flawless and win a national championship are Jameis Winston and Trevor Lawrence only had to play the second half of the season. So, like, there isn't a history of this happening. Like, true freshmen struggle, like, sometimes, no matter how good they are. Underwood's amazing. He's a true freshman. Like, he's not going to be able to pull Michigan out of every dark corner that they're in. You know, he's very good, but they'll be fine. I imagine that we won't have a play on the game. I imagine they'll be fine against Washington this week. That's a difficult travel spot for Washington, honestly. Yeah. I think I'm going to be on College Football with Sam show, talking a little bit about Michigan football this week. Michigan's one of those programs, and coming in from a Texas grad, you know, I really question, what do Michigan graduates and fans think their program is? And I say that in the context of, I went to University of Texas from 2011 to 2016. So I was there for the end of the Mack Brown era and the Charlie Strong years. And we got to a point to where there was a year where 7 rounds of the NFL draft happened and we didn't have a single player drafted. And I asked people, what do you think the program is? You know, like, people, like, we would lose games to teams that were better than Texas. And people would act surprised because we would get some preseason ranking, or because we're Texas and we have the Texas logo on our helmets. And I was like, what do you think the program is? Like, do you think we are a good football team right now? And the answer was no. But I was shocked at, like, how many people were like, well, we're like, I mean, we should be competing for Big 12 titles. And I'm like, should and what we are actually capable of with the current construct of roster and coaching are two very different things. And I'm very curious from the Michigan side. Like, Michigan is not a reload program. They haven't been a reload program ever. They won the title in 97 and then they won one in 23. That's a 26-year gap. And under Lloyd Carr, they always still had build years. Under Harbaugh, who's probably their best coach since Bo, I mean, maybe better than Bo. Given the era that you constructed, like, they still had to have build years. The 23 title started with 21, build into 22, build into 23. And so, like, they have Underwood. You could have argued that last year, had they had Underwood at quarterback, then would have been an all-in year. But they're a build program. And Sam's probably the most logical Michigan fan that I've ever dealt with, and I think he understands that. But I'm really curious, like, what is the pulse on the Michigan fan base of, like, what? Because people are talking about firing Sean Moore, right? Which I think Moore's a moron. I think he's, like, one of the worst head coaches in college football. But they're talking about firing him for all the wrong reasons. Like, they're not talking about firing him because he's an idiot. They're talking about firing him because they're like, we should be competing for titles. Well, no. You really shouldn't be competing for a national title this year. Honestly, you shouldn't be competing for a Big Ten title this year because you lost all the draft picks last year. Like, last year was the team, and now you have a quarterback this year, but it's a freshman. Like, this is a build year. They shouldn't be competing for either a Big Ten title or a national title this year. They should be a fringe playoff contender. Like, and I don't necessarily know if, like, the people who make decisions at that program or the people who influence the social media crowd who makes decisions, like, to then gets in their head to make decisions, understand that. And again, it comes from the context of, like, I went through all this with Texas. When Texas was, like, terrible. It wasn't even that they were, like, a friend. They were just awful. And it was just inconceivable sometimes, like, what people's vision of is and should be, how they, like, mix together. So, like, yes, I think Sean Moore should be fired, but that's because he's an idiot, not because, like, of something that Michigan isn't accomplishing right now, that given the current construct they should be accomplishing, if that makes sense. USC, we'll see. This week is going to tell a lot. this week is going to tell a lot. I said USC was a playoff contender preseason. I still think they're a playoff contender. How real that is, a lot of that will be determined Saturday night in South Bend, quite honestly, especially with the remaining schedule that they have. And what is some perceived improvements to Notre Dame that I think are real. So we'll see. Auburn, Georgia, I don't even want to. I don't want to talk about it because honestly, I don't feel equipped enough to talk about it. I know Josh Pate talked about it quite a bit in terms of how college officiating is done. People are getting on the Auburn athletic director for ripping the officials at the middle of halftime. Now, did the reaction of the Auburn athletic director as well as Hugh Freeze as it was going on tell you that Georgia was going to come back and win that game? Yes, it did. There is a difference between reacting appropriately to something like that happened and also remembering we are in the middle of a game which we have a lead and we can win and can be a program-defining win. And instead we let this become the main topic. And human beings, like your players are human beings, and they see things like that, like they see you react that way. They take the notion from that, and so you have to have that sort of designation in there. You have to be able to delineate. You have to be able to know we're getting fucked right now. We also want to win this game. I will deal with the SEC and all that after the game is over. For now, this happened and we still have a second half to play. And they didn't do that. And Kirby and Georgia just showed again, you have to beat them. You have to, they are not just going, they're not just going to go away because they're down in a game. You have to beat them, you have to cut the head off the snake, and you have to kill Georgia. And if you don't do that, they're going to beat you. You have to do what Ole Miss and what Notre Dame did last year. If you do what Alabama did last year, you do what Alabama did this year, you do what last year, they're going to get back into the game. Alabama won, but they got back into the game. If you do what Texas did in the SEC championship game last year, they're going to come back and beat you. If you do what Tennessee did last year, they're going to come back and beat you. So you have to truly beat them. They may not be the best team. They're definitely not the best team. You can never count them out until you actually kill them. And Auburn didn't do that. Late night, not too much to talk about Utah and Arizona State. Utah is clearly the second contender in the Big 12. They have a really difficult game with the Holy War this weekend. That line being essentially a 3.5 point game. Not essentially, it is a 3.5 point game. So could be a win or loss for them. I think Arizona State will bounce back. They were never going to win, never going to compete in that game without Sam Leavitt. The Texas Tech Arizona State game is very interesting. Texas Tech again played a good opponent, Utah, now Kansas, with their backup quarterback in the game and beat the ever-loving shit out of. Now this one was a little bit different because they didn't have to rely on the backup quarterback because they're still running right now for 875,000 yards against Kansas, but they still want the backup quarterback. So the game this week, Arizona State, Texas Tech, is one of the more interesting games of the week. And can Arizona State be the first team to actually give Tech a game? Or are they going to blow out everyone on their way to a Big 12 title and then not have their first test until the playoff? Fascinated by it, honestly. And fascinated by the Utah-BYU game. 2 banger Big 12 games this year. Big 12 is just getting zero respect, which is what we expected. Like the fact that BYU-Utah wasn't even in contention for game day or college football big noon kickoff. It's just sad, man. Like, it's just sad. You got an undefeated BYU team against a one-loss Utah team for the Holy War, and it's not even wasn't even in a conversation. Such a good game. Anyway, that's really it. We will be back at you again tomorrow with our wrap up for NFL Week 6. No picks that we've added after the ones we already gave you yesterday so far. Just a lot of line monitoring right now. We will have less plays than we did last week in college football this upcoming week. We'll play every NFL game like we always do. Appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Let me know what your thoughts are on college football Week 7 as well as kind of the landscape moving forward.